When I opened the file, everything changed. After the most intense period of my life, my training was over and I was about to start my first case. I glanced around the office. All the other agents were on laptops or consulting on their phones. I looked down at the manila folder on my desk. There was one word on its cover: classified. I had been told in my briefing that morning when it was given to me that it had not been digitized. "It's just too far down the food chain," my supervisor had added, which is why it had been given to me. I knew. I needed to prove myself before I was given responsibility for higher profile assignments. I lifted the cover of the file. The text was faded, typed double-spaced. I began to read. September 9th, 1955. The fire had been burning for 6 days. I was still 15 miles away and pulled up at the side of the road checking the map when I noticed tiny dark specks floating in the air. Wondering what they could be, I held out the palm of my hand and let a few settle. I felt sharp pains in my skin and realized that this was debris from the blaze, reduced almost to nothing but still burning hot. It was a fine, mild day, and I had the window of the car rolled down. A few more miles along the road I could taste as much as smell the smoke, just before I saw the darkening of the sky. Then I heard the crackle of the flames, and by the time I saw the first of the emergency vehicles, I could feel the unnatural heat on the side of my face. I rolled up the window, parked, and went to find someone to report to. This was a courtesy. I was following protocol and shared only the prepared legend with the fire marshal, who I had learned had been tasked with leading the effort to bring the fire under control. In the hours before the fire took hold, there had been a number of reports of a shooting star coming to ground in this vast forest. The nearest centers of population were over 150 miles away, and there was believed to be no loss of life or concern for damage to property. A statement had been issued by the local governor to this effect, which went on to say it was believed to be a meteorite that had crashed to Earth. A very rare occurrence, and no more were expected. In short, watch the game later, enjoy your TV dinners, and do not worry. We got this. I explained my presence to the fire marshal by telling him, in strictest confidence, that the meteorite was a cover story, and that it was in fact a Russian surveillance satellite which had crashed, and I was there to supervise its safe recovery. I am pleased to note that he seemed to take this in stride, though I would not be providing the full picture if I did not add that I was clearly low down on his order of priorities. The density of the trees and the ferocity of the flames had led him to make the decision to create a firebreak around the edges of the blaze. Any flames that traversed this would be tackled by crews on the ground, based in the newly created space. It was a mammoth task, requiring hundreds of men. I was reduced to an observer for the next 48 hours. There was nothing I could do to expedite my assigned mission: to locate the UFO, which had been tracked entering national airspace shortly before the shooting star reports began to come in. The firebreak constructed, I had hitched a ride with the fire marshal as he inspected and encouraged his troops. We pulled up at regular intervals so we could talk, check equipment, pat already exhausted-looking men in the back, and tell them that they were heroes. It was on one of these stops that I heard a scream come from deep inside the forest, from the direction of the heart of the fire. It stopped us all in our tracks. We turned as one and looked into the flames. No one suggested trying to rescue whatever it was that had cried out. It was a miracle anything had survived in there so long, and death was by now the only outcome. I kept to myself my belief that the cry had not sounded human or like any animal native to that region which I knew of. To raise this would have deviated from my mission parameters. Soon, the sound of fire and of the men and equipment battling to hold it back were once more all that could be heard. The coffee that I had collected on the way from the briefing back to my desk had gone cold, but I sipped it anyway. Around me, the other agents got on with their work. I had forgotten they were even there until I looked up. I stretched and turned to a new page. October 3rd, 1955. The fire was gone. This was its afterimage. The gray smoke that still rose from the darkened earth. The blackened, burnt trees whose damaged branches looked like the withered fingers of rotting corpses. I walked through this nightmarish environment weeks after the fire itself had burnt itself out. The break had proved effective, and the fire had been left with nothing to consume. The others had all left. I traveled alone towards the center of where the blaze had been, its starting point, the landing place. I kept to as straight a line as possible in the terrain. The bones and small complete skeletons of animals lay everywhere on the forest floor. The stench of burnt matter was all pervading, and my eyes and nostrils and the back of my throat stung. I was concerned that I would not be able to go on, but if I turned back, that meant a further delay in completing my mission. I continued. My perseverance was rewarded around an hour later. I began to see trees that were tilting to one side. This became more severe as I walked on, and before long, a swath of leaning and toppled trees appeared in front of me. This was a separate trauma to the damage caused by the fire. I picked up my pace. I was eager to see. I clambered over fallen trees, felt the stinging touch of branches that remained and still smoldered as they brushed against me, until I reached a clearing, what I now knew to be not the landing place but the crash site. The craft had been cylindrical and looked to have been snapped almost in half by the impact. Only silvery threads that were metallic in appearance connected the two sections. I wondered if they were an equivalent to cables. I was considering entering one of the sections when I saw the body. It lay partially hidden under the craft. It was around 4 feet long and slim, with arms and legs in proportions as might have been seen on a human child. Its hands were cruder than a child's, with 2 thick, curving fingers in each hand. Its eyes were white orbs that dominated its face. There was no nose, mouth, or ears that I could discern. There were a series of small slits fanning out from a point just below the center of its eyes, until they covered the lower part of the face. They looked to me as if they had been cut into the skin-like primitive tribal markings, though no coloring distinguished them that I could see. The outer layer of body, like its surroundings, had taken on an ashy hue because of the fire, and it could have been that any pigmentation had been lost. I paused then, told myself to stop imprinting human images onto this alien being. I most likely had no points of reference for what I was seeing here. I moved around the clearing with as calm a mind as I could summon. There were no more bodies. I decided to walk around the perimeter of the crash site to see if there were any more bodies further out, and then work my way inwards and complete my initial examination by then entering the craft. I had been pacing around for around 20 minutes when I found them. I counted 8 alien bodies that had been laid out in a line on the forest floor. They were partially buried, with their eyes and the marking on their faces visible. I dug into the earth with my fingers at a number of points around the bodies, to see if they had been buried with any possessions, but I found nothing. My supposition is that there had been one survivor from the crew, and that they had buried the dead as best they could before they too succumbed, whether from injuries sustained in the initial crash, the effects of the fire or smoke, or from natural conditions on the Earth's surface which could have proved fatal to them. Their last act, I believe, was to try and return any sanctuary offered by the interior of the craft. It was by this stage growing dark and I had no means of continuing my exploration, so I began the trek back to my base, a mouse-infested motel in which I had already spent many long, uncomfortable nights trying to sleep. Here, the narrative ended with a short note that looked to have been typed on a different machine. Seemed to be secured in further investigation and recovery of objects to be made when resources allow. Agent reassigned. A red date stamp placed this in early October in 1955, and an illegible signature sealed the deal. The agency is at the end of the day a bureaucracy funded by the government and run by pencil pushers. There is always new crises, pressures to focus in dozens of different directions. It's an impossible ask. It looked to me as if I closed the file that the crash site had fallen through the cracks in the system. It had resurfaced because of 2 calls to a sheriff's office that sent up red flags in our countrywide covert monitoring system. I logged into my laptop and clicked on the links my supervisor's executive assistant had sent me. Both were hurried, breathless. Neither provided their name as the operator requested. The sound quality was poor. We had lost track of time and set up camp in the old woods in a clearing that we found just before it grew dark. We were woken in the night by the sound of movement outside. Something then started to claw the fabric of the tent. Neither of us were armed, so we waited and it grew quiet again. And whatever it was, it seemed to go away. In the morning, we couldn't see any wild animals, but we did find what looked to be the wreckage of a plane or maybe a big helicopter like in the movies. The reason that I'm calling you is that there were bones by the wreckage. They don't look like animal bones to me. This was the recording of the first caller, a man. The second was a woman. I've seen a monster. It was Bigfoot, only bigger, and it had no feet. I was in the woods with my friend Dwayne because I like him, but he has issues with PTSD, so he can't cope with regular holidays. I had went out by myself to relieve myself when I saw it. It was huge and filthy, and it was crawling with bugs, and it was watching me. I screamed, and Dwayne came running, only with his gun jammed so he couldn't shoot at it. You have to do something. In the briefing, my supervisor had told me to go to the site and reevaluate what was actually there, and provide costings for its removal if that was deemed necessary to prevent public disorder. It was said in such a matter-of-fact way that I had no qualms about my safety, as I signed out a four-wheeler and set off on what would be a 4-day-long drive. August 5th, 2021, 5:21 a.m. I am recording my visit to the scene of the crash site on my phone for later transcribing. The day is already humid and I am now concerned I am unprepared as regards my clothing and equipment, as I follow in the footsteps of my fellow agent more than 60 years ago. I do not want to delay, so I am pressing on. I have lost reception, so I am relying on glimpses of the sun and its position through the canopy of the trees to keep heading in the right direction. There are no signs of the devastating fire. The forest is verdant, and I am constantly catching sight of rustling undergrowth, hearing calls, but I have yet to see anything. Even though the human presence is incredibly rare here, the wildlife is clearly shy of us. Now that I am here, I can understand why there have on occasion been visitors. The day-to-day world in which we live, with its constant urgency and people and buildings pressing in on us, could not feel further away. I believe I'm about 2 hours away from the crash site, so I will turn off the recorder until I reach it. 8:30 a.m. It's taken me longer than I anticipated, and there was a period where I thought I'd become hopelessly lost, but I think I made it. There has been a good degree of new growth, but the remains of fallen trees are still clearly visible, and there is a patch of open land. Whether the intensity of the fire here means that the land is not recovered, or if there was some substance in the alien craft, fuel or such that has poisoned it, I do not know. I can see the craft, broken in two as described, and as I walk towards it, I can see the first bones. I assume this is what is left of the alien corpse. First discovered, it is a whole skeleton, approximately 4 feet long. The skull is narrow and there are small, very sharp teeth still showing on the jaw. There is a spine, and rather than a ribcage, there is a solid curving bone. The remainder of the structure resembles that of a human, though the hands and feet look simpler, with fewer, larger bones. I am here to analyze and report, not run away and conjecture, but I can't help but wonder what this creature would have moved like. Did it have a voice? Was it intelligent, and was its perception greater than mine? All moot points at the moment. I had a job to do. Wait. I don't know if that noise was picked up by the recorder, but there was movement just beyond the far edge of the clearing. I appear to have company. I have been trained to deal with conflict in high-pressure situations, though I've yet to put this training into practice. I am not expecting to encounter Bigfoot. What is it though? There, it moved again. I'm going to approach with caution. The recorder won't be picking this up, but I can hear my heartbeat going 10 to the dozen. Sure better than working 9 to 5 though. Sure better than working off my old man's farm. Holy crap. I can see it through a break in the foliage. I am 6'2" and it is at least twice my height. It is moving slow. Its feet look like the roots of trees, exposed roots that are trailing, reaching across the ground beneath. Its fingers are of the same appearance. Its body. My eyes are acclimating to the situation. It seems to be covered with earth. The dark earth on which I stand. There is movement on it as well. It must be insects. It is crawling with them. Only there is nothing on its body. It is the naked earth skin of the thing itself that is moving. I should get closer, try and communicate with it. I'm scared though. Terrified. Concentrate, it is moving away from me. I have to follow. Dang it. It's heard me. It's turning. There are visions of below in medieval paintings populated with faces such as I'm seeing now. Inhuman faces twisted by forces that we cannot comprehend into something that is both hideous and tragic. Our eyes meet. I see recognition in the two dark orbs set into the rippling, pulsing, obscenely animate matter that forms its face and its body. It has seen me and knows that I am here, and it turns away from me, moves slowly away through the trees and the undergrowth until it is lost to me. I stand and watch. I think I'm going into shock. I have resigned from the agency. I cannot do the job anymore. Cannot see the future in which I sift through details to find cold reason. I walked away from the phone box outside the diner which I'd used to deliver the news. It was the first building I came to after driving away from the forest. What happened there will never leave me. I'm haunted by it. Had something remained inside their bodies, strands in the aliens' genetic makeup there to ensure these beings could one day return, had they been nourished by the rotting leaves which had fallen each autumn, and the bodies of the animals that had died since they were themselves were buried. Was that why they had been laid to rest in the way they were, so close to the surface? And had they bonded with the very fabric of the forest in which they had been buried? The dark earth renourished after the cleansing fire, the crawling, burrowing insects, the searching roots of the trees. To become the thing that I had seen, the creature of root and bug and restless earth. I had only questions as I began the long drive back to my home city, where I would go off-grid and try and regather my thoughts and find a way forward for my life. When I opened the file, everything changed forever.